This is Guderians Blitzkrieg 2. It's from MMP Games and it's part of the Operational Combat series. What we're going to do now is have a look at this particular battle. Now, we're playing the Typhoon start from 1st of October, as it is. So it's a main campaign game. It's using all 6 maps here. The actual game is about 171 turns long, but there's no way I'm going to do that because it actually lasts all the way to May 1943 if you want to play it. What I'm intending to do with this is see how far the Germans can actually get. We want to, a victory is going to be whether we get to Moscow or not, basically. We want to do a little better than the Germans did historically. You can pretty much divide this battle into 3 points, although if you were going further into the campaign you could put down many more markers than that. We've got the initial attack, which consists of basically the 3 panzer groups which are going to attack on the 1st of October. Well, in fact, the Bryansk group, starts on the 1st of October. The other 2 groups went a day later. There are some rules where I've got these little pink things here that simulate the fact that this group over here actually attacks early. Now, that was the main drive, and it was designed to make a lot of territory and encircle a huge amount of Soviet troops in what was in the Vyazma pocket. Now, Vyazma being this town here, the idea was the pincers would come round from here. Let's go back a bit so you can see the pincers come round there. From both sides and entrap all these Soviet armies in here. The other bit was there was like an outer pincer which Guderian was supposed to do. I'm not sure quite where that was going to close historically, but yet again it puts the Russians in even more of a panic because there's another force coming in behind their flank. Now, that was the first stage, and that resulted in the Soviets losing about 600,000 prisoners in the Vyazma pocket, but they actually did get about 150,000 troops out of that pocket because it was never particularly well closed because the system the Germans were using, the armour outran the infantry, so although pocketed large numbers of troops, these pockets weren't by no means sort of leak proof, let's put it that way. The next stage was the November attack onto Moscow itself, which is the second phase of Typhoon. Operation Typhoon being this attack on Moscow. Now, the third stage of the battle, which I would actually be continuing, is the Soviet counter-offensive in January, when large numbers of units were pulled from Siberia and Manchuria to bolster the Soviets. So at that point, even though the Soviets had lost over 1 million prisoners and killed and wounded, they had another 1.5 million troops arrive at the critical point, which resulted in a bit of a panicked German sort of retreat. Although they did actually hold the ground, but they ended up a long way away from Moscow at the end of it all. Now, the other bits that go on, there's loads of bits. There's the battles around Vyazma. There's this game even goes to Operation Mars, which is a an operation many people have never heard. You'll have heard of Operation Uranus, which was the Soviet encirclement of Stalingrad, but the Operation Mars was the equivalent in the north, which was a complete disaster. It's something the Red Army and the Soviets tend to kept quiet about it. It wasn't Rif, the big battle around there. Also, they kept very quiet about that as well, because that was a complete debacle. Now, we're looking at the two armies. Soviet army, it's big, but it's not that big. It's very poor. There are, on the board at the moment, there's no formations I would describe as a modern, well, a state-of-the-art World War II combat unit. There's a couple of little cavalry units, which are multi-unit formations, but they're very, very weak. Now, one thing the Soviets will get a lot of much better units. Depending on how far you go into this, the more and more stuff they're going to get coming in. So they've really got to make do with what they've got. They're poor quality units. They've got low action ratings, low mobility. There are very few tanks knocking around. The Air Force, the Russian Air Force, is very poor. There's a lot of it. A lot of it's concentrated around Moscow as well, which can't be just used in the main battle. But what there is poor fighters. Fighter attack value of 2 against the German fighters, which got attack value of 4. Soviet Air Force, they can't hip shoot. Hip shoot means you can't attack enemy stacks while you're doing in overruns in the movement phase, whereas the German, all Luftwaffe units can basically attack during the movement phase to get a decisive overrun against formations in front of them. Gives them a lot more flexibility. If you look at the German units themselves, there's a lot of state-of-the-art formations, these Panzer formations. Notice that one hasn't got a disc. I'll do that in a second. These are the actual creme de la creme of the German army. There's lots of infantry divisions around it, which are pretty good. They've got the good factors, but they're not very mobile. Slightly more mobile than the Russians, but not much better. As I said, the German Air Force fighters are good. You've got quite a lot of bombers. You've got, as I say, they can all do like hip shoots. So the German Air Force is vastly superior. The German Army is very, very much superior. Now, the one thing I will say about it, they don't have a huge amount of supply, but most of the divisions start with their trucks all fueled up, ready to go. So they're going to be mobile, but there isn't a huge stock of supplies for the Germans to move with here. And things are going to get worse as well. The German logistics system starts to break down as this game goes on, particularly as the weather gets bad. There's a lot of attrition on German trucks and things like that that really starts whittling things down. So it's going to get nasty. That brings me on to the weather itself. Now, this is one of the great sort of what ifs of this particular campaign. If the Germans, instead of sending their panzer armies north to Army Group North and South to encircle the Soviets around Kiev, if they'd just gone straight for Moscow, they would have made it And I'm firmly of the belief they would have made it. Now, the thing is, if you captured Moscow, would the Russians have surrendered? I say they wouldn't have done. Because the Russians, it's all right individual units surrendering when they run out of ammunition and they're cut off from the rest of their army. But for a nation like the Soviets to surrender, that they knew what the Germans were about, and they either died fighting or they died as slaves. So I don't think they would have pulled back. And you've also got to remember they got support from the Americans and the Commonwealth forces, which cannot be underestimated. I know the Soviets tend to downplay just how important Lend-Lease was, but it was a massive thing for them. Not necessarily so much in the equipment that was sent over, apart from aircraft, the good aircraft they got, but the fact that virtually every truck they used and things like that was an American truck, etc. So Lend-Lease was really important to them. Now, a lot of Germans sort of said, well, yeah, Hitler made us go south and wrecked everything, and we would have succeeded. And then they also go on to say that if the weather hadn't been appalling, they would have made it to Moscow. Yet again, I would have probably said, yeah, that's true, but I don't think they could have seriously taken Moscow because the army was shot. It was, if you read some of the modern sort of accounts of the battle, I think it's War Without Garlands or something, which is an interesting modern one. They say the German army was finished. It was on its last legs by the time it got to Moscow anyway. If you look at the start phase, the German infantry is all pretty good. There's very few units that have lost any steps, but there's quite a few panzer units that are in the dead pile. So virtually every one of the main panzer divisions is down a panzer battalion, which is a third of their armoured strength. Other things about the battle is, could the Soviets have actually won the war in the winter of 1942? Possibly. There's a good chance the Germans would have broken around Moscow. It was only Hitler's "you mustn't give up any ground" sort of orders that made sure the German army hold itself. If it had started to run during the depths of winter, it could have been something similar to what happened to Napoleon's army in 1813. So, yeah, things could have got really dicey for the Germans. That's pretty much all I want to say about the battle, and there's a lot of stuff written about it, and it's, to me, you're running against the clock here. You're running against a couple of factors: the collapsing German logistics, the distance you've got to go to get to Moscow from the starting point, and the rapidly deteriorating weather. And then you've got the fact that the Soviets were able to throw another 1.5 million troops into the battle right near the end. So that's my introduction to the game.